Okay, this is the last session, but a very interesting one. In fact, when we had a pre-panel call, actually it was scheduled for 30 minutes, but we continued to discuss for almost an hour. So we already had our discussion. So this is probably revisiting some of those interesting conversations. As was discussed, we are talking about the future. And why do we predict the future? Why do we want to look at the future? Connecting to the theme is, if you know what is likely to come ahead, you can plan better. You can plan your actions better, so that the trust, which is the theme of this seminar, we are able to continue to build trust whilst we innovate. Because oftentimes it so happens that innovation, the technologists and the the marketing teams, they get very excited and they want to continue to sort of build, believing that this is good for the consumers. But then you have the legal and compliance teams figuring out what does it really mean, not only from legal perspective but from ethical perspective, right? And how to continue to have the responsibility, accountability, integrity, all those words that you have heard throughout the day today. So before we get into the nitty-gritties of the conversation, let's just do some crystal ball gazing. If you were to write a script for a Spielberg film, how would the future of advertising be for 2030? And the reason we, sort of have this question is because a lot of innovations that you see today, in fact, were back in, in our childhood, the sci-fi films that we have seen. So who wants to start first? Maybe, yes?
2030 Steven Spielberg. Number one, it won't be a sci-fi movie. It'll be a horror flick, because it'll be all about a consumer trying to buy something. He or she will pick up their phone, say, "Hey, I want to buy a moisturizer." LLM will say, "Oh, you can buy this. Buy now. Done." There, advertising is dead. The entire advertising journey is invisible. So in Steven Spielberg's version, AI is not the enemy. Invisibility is.
This is a difficult one for me. As a lawyer, I'm creative with terms and conditions, contract drafting, but script is something new for me. So, but I think Mr. Spielberg has made many movies around technology. One that comes to mind, and I'll borrow the scene from there, is Minority Report. I don't know whether you've seen it, but there's an entire scene about Tom Cruise going through an entire office space or mall, and that's where you see him interacting with billboards, where it's and then if I have to break the themes that the script would talk about is hyper-personalization, because he's interacting with screens. The advertisement there is personalized to Tom Cruise. Spatial technology, where audio is also coming to him at a personalized level. I think that that script or the scene is something that I can associate with. I don't think so I'll be able to come up with something really creative on my own. But the other two themes that come about, apart from hyper specialization, is, I think, interconnectivity, immersiveness, and interactiveness. I think that as an advertiser is going to define how technology will get advanced, used even in real life in the advertising ecosystem.
Super. Dipanjan?
So on an average, I think a Spielberg film would take about 3 to 4 years to make, typically, and probably hundreds of millions of dollars to make. So if I have to predict, the good thing about this panel is that we are predicting the future. So whatever we say doesn't matter. It'll be entirely made with AI. And instead of probably 3 to 4 years, it would probably be made in 6 to 8 months. And instead of probably a $300 million budget, it could be made with a $30 million budget. And we have started seeing that many short films, many actually hour-long films, which look incredibly real, because they are. But Spielberg will still be the director. And that's the difference. The tools will change. Probably the production house will no longer be required. But Spielberg will still be the driver of that engine.
I think we have got very good perspective from each of you. I think that human, sort of intervention, the point that you bring in, that the human intervention would always remain, is the theme that howsoever technologies develop, is that the sort of is that the way to look at things, or should remain? One is ought to or should?
The short answer to that question is it will and should
Yeah.
remain. Now, if you think about AI overall as a technology, it is a profound technology. We all know that. We know its capabilities. And it is something that probably we are seeing for the first time in 100 years,
Yeah.
the power of the technology. So while we have had many such technological shifts in the past, for example, when the internet came about, for example, when the mobile revolution happened, this is probably even much more profound than it is. But at the end of the day, it's a tool, it's a technology.
Yeah.
So the easiest analogy I can give is, you know, some of you who may be familiar with Formula One racing. The race car is extraordinarily built now with AI. The engine is faster, the technology is unreal, but at the same time, the driver of the car is still a human even today. So if you've seen how Formula One has evolved, we have the best Formula One engines, we have the best technology, we have the fastest, folks in the pit, but it's still the drivers who win the race.
Yeah.
So it's going to be together. It should be together.
Yes.
And I sincerely hope, since I'm predicting the future, it will be together.
We'll be together. Great. Bibhav, now coming to you as a sort of advertiser, you now will have AI generating content, personalizing content, predicting probably the consumer needs and all of that, right? There are so many things that a technology can do. So traditionally, you had what we call as mass storytelling or mass advertising, and now you're moving to probably personalized. Like we see the personalized medicine, everything is moving at a personal level, right? So, do you believe that these things will coexist, where there will be one mass message and one personalized? How do you see how does a brand sort of manage this phenomenon?
I'll break this into two
Yeah.
parts because I think there'll be phases. One is this entire digitization of even mass media, right? The connectivity which TV could not provide is it's going to be digital watching, whether it's cable TV, not cable, but where insights can be drawn by the brand. So that's going to influence how mass media will be defined separately. But getting into personalization was it's I think we've discussed in other panels and they were really insightful. One of the biggest problem with advertising industry today is the debate or the paradox around personalization versus privacy. That is going to define how advertising will shape in the next 5-10 years. It will be defined by responsible organizations like ours, self-regulators like ASCI, and the most important by societal norms, right? So when I look at advertising or personalization, I do see hyper-personalization movement towards that, but it will also, it's very difficult to predict as to what is annoyance vis-a-vis what is acceptability of personalizing content for you, right? Especially advertising content, not content that you watch for entertainment, etc. And therefore, what I do see is that there will always be a reason for mass media to coexist. But how I define mass media in the future, let's take 5 years down the line, is there will still be segmentation that's possible that's not there in TV because OTT is allowed. It may be TV or formats that the content that people are watching would allow those digital insights. So there will be some segmentation, but it would not be so targeted, personalized targeting, and therefore I would consider that mass media. That's what I see. But if you ask me for the
Sort
next
of
5 years,
cohort, you mean the cohort
yes,
based?
cohorting
Yeah.
is something that would come about as digitization, digital screens are going to become the norm. But till then, if it's not till that time, I think mass media with TV, radio would exist. I think there's a huge population. While we talk about digitization, digital footprint of the country, it's still a long way to go. So the next 5 years, I do see mass media playing an important role.
As a coexist. Okay. Vaseem, coming to you, you made a very profound statement, in your opening remark. If you want to just elaborate on that, and especially in the context of say interactivity or kind of the kind of storytelling, because now there will be, when there is that digital interaction possible. How do you see from a creativity perspective, how things are likely to change next 5 years?
First, I want to ask which statement did I say? Because
You
I
said that
completely.
you will not even know
Oh,
that.
that one. Okay,
Yeah,
that one.
exactly. Yeah.
So here's the thing, right? Every marketer who you talk to right now, they're going to say, "Oh, we have to use AI because it's cheap." Fine, it's cheap. Is it nice? It has some blemishes. Okay, but what is the reality? Like the bunker will tell you, AI is going to become democratized in like less than 12 months right now, right? That is going to lead to a problem of plenty, where everybody's going to have 600 videos per campaign, hyper personalized, but those are going to be those imperfect ads that are going to be there, right? So you're going to have a lot of content, but absolutely no significance, because everybody is going to make 600 videos, 500 banners, 17 podcasts, 2 3 long form content films. You're going to be drowning. Like, just think about it for yourself. Pick out your Netflix queue. How many shows are there right now that you plan to watch 6 months back and you just forgot about it, right? Because you are drowning and you don't realize that. Now add to that Gen AI, add to that a demanding market like India, add to that a client who is never happy, sorry, in this country, right? So you are going to go and try to super impress, over impress, blah 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 blah. What's going to happen is it's going to come down to the human truth. uh, as a planner, as a marketeer, you would know this insight will work in Wapi, this will kill in Chennai, this will not work in Mumbai. That is something AI can't do. That is where the human edge comes in. So you have to then move away from being like an operator who says, "Mere liye ye banao, wo banao." You then have to become like an LLM prompter that says, "You know what? I am going to be an architect. I want to know how to go about this." Because from a creative perspective, you have to be able to be in a position to say why an LLM is picking up your brand versus why it's not. Because if you can't do that, you're bringing a portfolio to an algorithm fight and you will never win that.
So just on this point, right? I mean, you had those 15 seconds and television. You have to convey a message. That was an art to convey a message. And my mama, he was in advertising, and he would tell us that you may like an ad, but you may not remember a brand,
Yes.
right? So then it is not a good ad. That's the content you have liked.
Communication piece.
Exactly. So, in the point that you mentioned, that with so much noise and so many things being thrown at you, is there a consistency required in the messaging? Because with influencer creating content, and one is brands their own communication, how do you maintain consistency? And I'm slightly jumping the gun here because you made the point. I thought I'll just bring that up.
So I'm going to borrow from his playbook.
Yes.
All the views expressed are my own, not the company's, not the industry. So please don't hold back on that. Currently, I feel the 21 billion plus dollar influencer industry is pretty much, if you look at it closely, resembles very close to the subprime mortgage scam, right? There are no real metrics that you're going after, no real realities as to what you're going to look at. But we're still going and building at it.
Yeah.
So if you ask any marketer, why are you doing this? Brand lift. How do you
Yes.
gauge brand lift? I don't know. What do you want? Engagement. How do you gauge that? Oh, likes, shares, and all. Does it do anything for your business? No. When you go down this rabbit hole of influencers, this is my personal prediction. Number one, guys who will come out are going to be a nano guys, nano influencers.
Yeah. Okay.
These are the guys who are like chumma authentic for you. Like they will give you an authentic view कि कौन सी चप्पल खरीदनी है, कहाँ पे मिसल पाव खाना है, ये गाना कौन सा अच्छा है, which is the hook step to go for. These are the 1,000 to 10,000 follower guys. As a brand marketeer, you can't control them. But if control is what you want, then you have your AI influencers.
Yes.
They are there 24/7 for you. They will give you the perfect product demo. They will answer all the questions. You can have as many live Q&As with them as possible. The third category of influencers that will actually make an impact is going to become the creator consultant. Now, say Super You, say Naked, say Hyphen. All of these are influencer brands. Now, tomorrow, Tanmay Bhatt may not sit across the table and say, "Pay me so much for a post." He may say, "Pay me in ESOPs or get me on your board, and I will help you build that brand."
Understood.
So that is where the
That's
next
where the
generation is
future
going
is.
to come in
Okay.
from,
Okay.
versus just paying and not getting anything back. Again, my personal view, guys, do not quote me. Okay.
When you have, like platforms increasingly are shaping, the way the communication is taken to the consumer, right? So when you have ecosystem where you have advertiser, ad agencies, influencers, etc., how do you see from a platform perspective, how you see uh, platform's involvement, number one, and otherwise this entire ecosystem in terms of each stakeholder responsibility.
So two parts to the questions, if I understand it correctly. So let's talk about the platform's role first. So fundamentally, if you think about it as marketing, we've generally been till now what we do is reactive marketing,
Right.
which is based on past user behavior. Even if it's a minute ago, we try to target them and sell a messaging. I think fundamentally what will shift and the role that the platforms will play with the advent of AI is we are going to move from reactive marketing to predictive marketing. And to simplify it, what it simply means is, let's say today, and I'll take the example of a simple Google search, is I say, buy tennis shoes would be a typical search query. So that's obviously showing intent, but today an advertiser would show their search ad against that query. Now, what we are seeing with AI coming in is we are moving from what we called query to conversation. So search is becoming conversational. So now with, let's say, AI mode on Google, we are seeing users write whole sentences and almost talking to Google saying that, hey, I want to buy tennis shoes. By the way, I have a certain condition on my feet, and I recently saw my colleague Abhay wearing this particular brand. Do you think it's good? It's literally conversational and no longer a query. So we are moving from query to conversational. And with AI coming in, I think that will move the whole marketing activity from reactive marketing to predictive marketing. And which it means that it's no longer about brands and advertisers being available to the user at the point of sale. They will be in front of the user even before the user realizes that they probably need this in 6 months' time. So it's predicting what potentially a user would need, and rightfully so, and being there in front of the user so that when the time comes to purchase a particular product, the brands would have already had a chance to influence the user in the right way.
Can I ask a question that if I've already bought a product, can this ad stop now?
Certainly. So in the advertising world, it's called remarketing.
Yeah.
So of course, there are smart ways of doing remarketing, and there are some not so smart ways in doing remarketing. So yes, anyone, and of course, most brands will know that by now. There are smart
Yes.
ways of doing remarketing where once the brand recognizes that the user has bought something, then it just makes
More more
obvious sense.
engagement. Yeah.
Actually, it just makes business sense
Yeah.
because otherwise you're wasting your marketing dollars
Absolutely.
on someone who's already purchased the product. So yes, technology is evolved enough in ad tech to stop showing
Sure.
you ads.
Sure. With so much development happening in terms of the innovation because of the tech, right? I think what we are also realizing that your marketing teams, let us just sort of visualize your marketing teams, they can't just focus on content anymore. I'm sure your marketing teams are evolving in terms of understanding of technology is going to be equally important. Content is already getting created through AI. Even the predictions, as you rightly said, are being provided through AI. Even, a sort of interaction can be driven by AI. So how do you see in terms of skill development? What are the next level of skill development for advertisers? If you want to start, Vaseem, on that.
Again, disclaimer, I am not saying which jobs will not be available after 5 years.
No, I'm not even saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what all we need to do. So,
Yeah.
what he mentioned is a very potent point. You will always need people who can think forward. You can always peep into the crystal ball and say what's happening. Right now, what we are doing is we're building for surfaces. We're building
Yeah.
for video, static, GIFs, audio, etc. What we need to look at is, say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line, you're going to start looking at distribution thinking. That's where a disruption is going to come from. Because if Gowree has asked which is the best tennis shoes to buy, and Gemini tells you this is the one, and here's your AGO link. That's it. Your entire marketing funnel has collapsed for you
Correct.
right there. There was no creative director involved. There was no copywriter involved. There was no big film director making anything nice, fancy, Steven
Yes.
Spielberg types, right? Now, the whole idea is how do you actually start building for that distribution center?
Yeah.
That is where you need to start learning how LLMs work. How exact. So, to give you a very simple answer, pre 2022, we were living in a destinations infrastructure. The good old world, SEO world. You type in a query, you get a destination, you click on the destination, you browse through 15 pages, find an answer, and yeah, you're home. Now you ask a question and you get the answer. The answers infrastructure sits on top of the destination infrastructure. Brands now need to understand how exactly are they going to rank over there. So say 5 years down the line, the brand who spends 5,000, 6,000 crores is not the one that's going to come up, but the brand that has the cleanest data sets. The brand has the cleanest first party data that can be synchronized and cited is what is going to get recommended. And the minute you win that battle, you are no longer fighting for the media money. So there would be brands that will spend money on making a billboard for a highway, but they are paying for a consumer who's not even going down that highway. That's the whole difference.
Bibhav, how do you see your, sort of marketing and promotions team, in terms of?
So I have a hope.
Yeah.
And that's what. So AI native skills,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Vaseem spoke about the experts. But as a risk navigator, as an advisor to the business, what I do hope for, and I am quite confident it'll happen, is a cultural shift towards
Yeah.
accountability and ownership around data governance, as Vaseem
Yes.
spoke about. I think marketers need to realize what data are they using.
Yes.
I think responsibility around personal data, as we want to hyper personalize. I think there is accountability that is required from organizations, the marketing professionals right now. As Vaseem mentioned, we are using and experiencing technology and understanding how it will be used in business. As an organization matures in this area, I think they will start realizing what and how they are differentiated from other advertisers, because everybody is using the same LLM building on it. So I
Yes.
think they'll invest. So I think data governance, data ethics, and data integrity are skill sets that I think marketing leaders, marketing
Right.
teams will have to pay more attention to, which currently is not the case. So that's the shift that I am looking at culturally.
No, absolutely. Because even in my earlier panel, this point came up, where I think, one of the suggestion was, can there be like, an officer, like we have a DPO, that the data protection officer, under the DPDP Act, a person who basically represents the interest of the consumer, sit at that conversation, right? Which was a very interesting, very interesting thought process, right? So maybe, when do you talk about marketing teams, you are creatives. If I just want to sort of summarize what you're saying, creative team, the tech team, the data, the people who understand data analytics and, the integrity, and of course, the customer trust person, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that is how, because things are evolving very fast, right? And sometimes in the earlier panel, we discussed about dark patterns. Why did they grow? And we had to sort of pull it back because we didn't realize we are going that way, right? So maybe it's good that we are having this conversation now and predicting, right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it defines how regulations would shape. There's always a pacing problem where
Yeah.
law, societal norm follows technological innovation, right? So conversations like these help us decide as to how
we
will
want
use this
to-
technology,
yeah.
what will be the
Yeah.
limitations. But when you speak about these special people who protect
Yeah.
consumer trust, I think there are mature organizations already doing that. Data stewards, which
Yes.
they're known, they are extended. Like I have heard of big tech using trust officers.
Yes.
They're called chief trust officers. I think, if I'm not wrong, SAP has. So there are mature organizations doing it. I'm assuming it will now trickle down because you're democratizing technology capability of personalizing. So there are smaller organizations with who do not have the wherewithal to really do cyber security checks, all of these data governance. So therefore, I think there is a need, and I think these will become core skills. Whether it is independent will be depending. It will depend on the resources of the organization also.
Of course. Dipanjan, that day when we were discussing, one interesting, issue as an aspect that came up thus far when you talked about ad world. You had advertiser, ad agency, and the media. right? In your case, the platforms, the digital conversation that we're having today, right? But with the AI coming in, there are other stakeholders. So who do you see in the scheme of things are playing major role in now the campaigns or the communication?
That's a good question because, so if you think about the traditional triad,
Yeah.
which is the brand, the agency, and the media owner, so that's kind of getting decentralized if you think about
Yeah.
it. So what we are seeing more and more is brands are having people like data officers, chief data privacy officers. So privacy officers, data officers, and also interestingly, with again AI coming in, the whole notion about creative directors, which is a very common term in the marketing industry. We are seeing that shift to creative engineers. And the difference between a creative director versus an engineer is a creative engineer is really a master of using AI tools. Again, I'll just throw in an example of VO3, of using those generative AI tools to come up with whether it's images, whether it's videos, and so on. Whereas the creative director overall gave guidance and came up with concepts and directed it. So it's still going to be there, but they're probably going to have creative engineers who are not only creative but have the technological ability to use certain AI tools to generate videos, generate creatives, and of course at scale. So uh, the privacy officers, chief data officers, and I would say creative engineers would probably, you'll see more and more of them.
Okay, so that's a new skill. Those are the professionals who will have now additional demand in this scheme of things.
So think about it. So again, to put it simply, in the traditional days of creative agency advertising,
Yes.
you had the creative guys who knew Adobe Photoshop really well.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So they were valued for their skill of
Right.
Illustrator and
Right.
Photoshop. Now you have the same guys, but who are really, really good with AI tools. So they will
Right.
be valued not only for their creative mindset, but also for their ability to use these AI tools in such a professional way that the outputs, the creative outputs are really, really superior.
Right.
So that would be the easiest parallel I could
Yeah.
draw.
Super. Let's move on, to the one of the other elements when you talk about trust, authenticity, so Bibhav, coming to you on this, and then, everybody else can add. With so much messaging happening, as we said before, one is the mass media, then you have personalization, then you have influencers, and earlier you just had, a 15-second ad. Maybe you would launch one ad a month or in a quarter, new ad or whatever. But so much content going out there. How do you track that the essence of the brand is maintained through all this new content that is getting generated? What are those steps that the brands will have to take going forward? Additional steps, rather.
Sure. So one of the things, at least I can tell you, the fundamentals don't change.
Yeah.
I think in an earlier conversation, Vaseem spoke about the brand
Yeah.
wheel.
Yeah.
A lot of you would know about. These would be the governing factors for any brand, right? So let's take an example of when you're building the automation in programmatic buying, or let's do a consumer-facing one where you're advertising or creating advertising for consumers. I think this brand wheel, the philosophy of the brand, what it wants to communicate will define what kind of content it would produce. I would assume that a responsible brand will understand what kind of content or what kind of advertisements is possible through any system that or technology that they've deployed, and they'll train, test it to produce outcomes that would reflect the brand values, right? And the fundamentals will stay the same. It's more about for marketing professionals to work and ensure that the technology that they're using, because there is autonomy that is going to come about, is going to produce the results that they want. Because one of the things that I think as marketing professionals, lawyers, everyone would believe, and then we saw in the last panel that consumers are going to be more discerning. Kids are much more demanding. When you look at personalization, it also comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Let's see, you and I know each other. I expect there's a certain trust. I expect
Yes.
you to respect my certain boundaries, etc. So when brands are and then personalization is definitely the need of the hour. When brands want to personalize, use that data, I think that trust, accountability would come about, and that's how I think it gets shaped. And otherwise, from a fundamental lens, it's more about governance around the tools, governing the outcomes, and how you do it would be all the skill sets that Dipanjan and Vaseem spoke about, the people who will be involved in that entire process. Otherwise, I don't think it will really change how brand authenticity is viewed by the consumer as such.
Sure. We sort of recently had, the information technology intermediary rules that got amended, and maybe all three of you can answer this question. And there is a concept of labeling of the AI generated content, right? Synthetic data. Uh, there will be some labeling expectation in certain situation, not all, luckily. But are there any other tools, when you are having this AI generated content or use of data, as Bibhav rightly pointed out, how do you communicate things to the consumer in a simplistic way to keep the trust going, which will include synthetic data and the use of their data for the purpose of marketing? Any thoughts on that?
So overall, I don't think you can fool a consumer today when it comes to authentic versus synthetic, right?
Yeah.
They are very well aware of what an AI looks like, and perfection is the biggest enemy for AI. I think the role that most ad agencies play is giving the human scar to each and every idea, that little bit of imperfection that you can actually add. Personally, if you think DPDP, for example, is a secret weapon, because if you were to, at a very functional level, at a brand wheel level, were to integrate how brands have to behave themselves, then the foundational essence becomes much more societal friendly versus let's go and sell stuff. And then from there, automatically, all the ideas that you see, the engagements that you see, the partnerships that you see will be a lot more data versus data compliant versus data opposing. And that's where the reality would set in for us. So tomorrow, if you ask me how exactly this would be, is yes, you can have a tag that says synthetic content or AI generated. But somewhere, if you were to just do a jam session between an AI and a real influencer and just look at it skyrocket, that's what people are looking for. People are looking for that little human element, because imperfection is where the new gold mine is.
So, as the younger generation says this, when they get AI generated content, I will now humanize it. That's what that's what they say, right?
They'll
Yeah.
unslop it.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Any thoughts on that?
So with the at least the intermediary rules that you're talking about,
Yeah.
one of the basic issues that I have is the definition and the wide definition of synthetic media and information, right? Even a filter is considered and can be considered synthetic media according to the definition, and therefore the struggle for most organizations of what do I label, and is it going to make my creative look bad, is it unnecessary, etc. So I think that is one trouble I see. But right now, the one thing that I see across all advertisers is labeling, as Waseem mentioned. That's the only way to do about and go about right now, and that's what brands would do. I think there would be there will be an evolution of what would require. Basically, the risk threshold is what I'm hoping for as the regulation evolves around synthetic media and information.
Any thoughts, Dipanjan?
So I take a slightly different view, and which is, to me, it's not about AI generated or real people talking about it. And I'll give you a simple example. So traditionally, whenever we see, let's say, an ad on TV of any simple product, I think most of us know that the people who are saying that to us on that commercial are actors.
Yes.
So we know that.
Yes.
So, but just because they are humans and they are telling us something, we tend to believe them. But we also know that they're actors. So technically, logically, I can also say that's fake because they are actors. They are being paid to say that, whether it's a child actor, whether it's an adult actor. The same extends to CGI. CGI has been in existence for many, many decades now. Green screens have existed for many, many decades now. So a lot of the times also when we see advertisements like, let's say, a dog flying, anyone with half a brain knows that that's not real. But there is a creative value to it for whatnot. So the way I think about it, it is not about the technology that is being used. Fundamentally, it's about is the communication misleading? Is it eroding trust? So you can have an amazing influencer, a human influencer, who is using AI tools, but actually providing content which is authentic, which is factual, which is really, really good and useful and beneficial. So should we ding it? Has the industry for the last few decades always put a label saying that CGI was used in this? We only used to have disclaimers when Akshay Kumar jumped from the cliff saying that, okay, don't try this at home. So, so it's an labeling is an interesting topic, but especially in the context of AI, there is also something called label fatigue.
The same way as consent fatigue, right? I mean,
Yeah, so label fatigue is essentially, and it can have the opposite effect.
Yeah.
For example, the reality is the future, in the future, all of marketing will use some bit of AI
Anyway,
for sure.
correct.
Now, the problem with label fatigue is if any part of that communication is used or generated through using AI tools and you label it, the general perception of a consumer might be, oh, it's AI generated, so it must be fake. But if it's CGI generated, it's not fake. If a human actor is acting it out, it's not fake. And the problem is, then the so-called bad actors will start using AI generated content, but not label it. And then, because the user's perception is if it's labeled, it's fake, whereas it's not labeled, it must be the truth. So the bad actors will start exploiting that, still use AI generated tools to provide content, but not label it to deceive the ultimate user. So ultimately, in my viewpoint, it comes down to, is a piece of communication misleading at a fundamental level, regardless of the tools that were used to come up with the creative storytelling behind it?
Statement that comes to mind as a lawyer and then he's absolutely right, it's a very pertinent is what courts have said, you take advertisement with a large pinch of salt, right? There is certain, and then I
Some
think
kind of puffery and all
absolutely,
of that.
and
yeah.
therefore that's what he's talking about. We've always used post-editing aspects in advertising, and also quite an interesting point.
Right.
I have something as well. Who all agree with me? The LinkedIn slop that we are all going through. People who can't say 3 cohesive sentences in a meeting, putting out 600 words every day, and we are all forced to just leaving it out there. I don't do it, just leaving it out there.
Yeah, I've stopped reading those posts completely, right? So
As of this morning, LinkedIn has introduced its second algo
okay.
for more engaged interaction. I'll send you the link.
Okay. I think we have few minutes left now, but I just do want to cover one, sort of last point with the DPDP Act coming in, and now, the more and more regulations around AI, etc. And then you have, ASCI like body doing self-regulation as well. Where do you see in terms of, next 5 years, with all the points that we discussed, how do you see that all of you can come together in terms of the common minimum benchmark, right? That all the stakeholders can really adopt. One is the law, right? But when you look at the DPDP Act also, I have examined, all the issues that will arise in terms of marketing, use of data, enrichment of data. There are a lot of gaps in terms of how it will really apply. Who is going to take consent, who really has that consumer connection, all of that, right? So when you have that the law which is not very clear in terms of adoption, how do you perceive that next 5 years in terms of development? What steps all of us should take so that everybody is at least at the same level of adoption in terms of compliance with law, plus on the building of trust, not just the compliance with law, but building trust in the new ecosystem that all of you have mentioned?
Every decade has a trend that people want to diss on. 2010, 2020 was digital transformation. Before that was logistics, all of
Yes.
those things. Amazon decided that logistics will not be a cost center, but it'll be a business position for them. And now it's making them billions. 2013, I was working on Mondelez. Mondelez had a very strict policy of not marketing to kids. They had signed a government body, I forget what it's called, right? What that did was it helped us immensely as guardrails as to what not to say when I'm selling gems to a kid or when I'm talking about pork to teenagers. Personally, it's very counterintuitive, but from a creative advertising standpoint, DPDP actually enables us because it tells us exactly what you should not be doing. It is better to get your heart broken at a brief stage versus making a fantastic idea and then ASCII saying, sorry, not allowed. So that's where I think it works, and it should be added at a foundational level, adopted across the board by media partners, influencers, creators, and communities. And then you see the difference in 5 years' time.
So one of the things that I do see, and I think India's approach to privacy or tech regulation has been the softer law approach rather than regulating or over-regulating, which I believe is the right way to go about because of the complexity, the pace at which technology is advancing. I think it needs time for regulations to really understand it, understand societal considerations, and then regulate it. And hence, organizations like ASCII, we spoke about the fintech SRO. Yes. I think those help in the softer legal approach in governing this. One of the things that is very interesting, and I think will define how advertising will work, is, and then because you asked around the law's impact, because it puts a lot of accountability and ownership on the data fiduciary or controllers in the GDPR sense. How the advertising ecosystem is shaped and standardized is also going to define. So today, I may have the confidence of Google and interacting with Google and how they handle my personal data, right? But when I go into the world outside Google with other programmatic buyers, is that something that is standardized? Do I get the same kind of transparency and accountability from those vendors? Because the value chain is so complex.
Yes.
And that would define as how advertising will grow. Maybe it may be platform-based because there are certain platforms which can give you that confidence to have a channeled, a funnel, top to bottom funnel engagement with the consumer in a personalized manner, as opposed to someone who doesn't have that control over it. So it's going to be defined by that. Because as an advertiser, I would want to know, I want to reach the consumer everywhere, but I want to reach out to them responsibly. So I need partners who create those systems. So just to give an example, today there's a lot of talk around AdCP, the advertising context protocol for agent AI,
Yeah.
for programmatic buying, right? I don't know whether it'll be successful. There's a lot of debate around it, whether it'll be successful. But those are things that the industry will have to work, collaborate on, because I don't think so. There is a lot of clarity as a lawyer, which my marketeers, data scientists, the data governance official leaders can give me in terms of consent passing through all
Yes.
the value chain, how the data is being handled, the scope of or the purpose that for which the data is being used, and that is going to define where advertisers are going to shift in terms of advertising.
Right. And you mentioned agentic AI. Maybe, sort of, you may want to sort of just add in terms of the point that we discussed, right? Because, and as you said, there are additional sort of, professionals that are going to come into the ecosystem. That how do you ensure that everybody understands the same thing in the same sense in terms of governance? What role can, bodies like ASCII play there?
I mean, let me first address
Yeah, sure.
the other part of the question. So if you think about it, most countries, what they're trying to do is balance regulation and innovation.
Yes.
So thoughtful regulation is always welcome. And from a platform standpoint, and I'll put it very simply, like most of the biggest platforms are investing billions of dollars, hundreds and billions of dollars into innovation, building new products. It is actually great for us to know what the rules of the game are before we start investing that money. If we are $100 billion in and then suddenly something comes up and say, oops, sorry, you can't do that.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of money. So thoughtful regulation is always welcome. What we also see in other parts of the world, somewhere between optimism and pessimism sits realism. India generally takes a very realistic and pragmatic approach when it comes to balancing innovation and regulation. And we've heard it from, many ministers and secretaries in different government organizations before, which is, let us put some broader guardrails around
Principle
what
based.
we should not absolutely be doing, which is the obvious things around, which causes damage to society and humanity at large. But then it also has a firm belief, and thanks to bodies like ASCI and other self-regulatory organizations, that the industry is able to self-calibrate at some stage.
On its own.
And it lets the market forces sometimes figure it out. And that's where self-regulation becomes so important. While thoughtful statutory regulation can provide the guardrails, it does not necessarily need to dictate every single part of how the innovation economy should work.
Right.
That's where they would expect an SRO to come in, bring all the stakeholders that are involved in that particular ecosystem to come together and agree, saying that, okay, let's all self-commit to these standards and hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
So while the challenge always becomes that sometimes enforcement becomes difficult,
Yes.
but then again, sometimes peer pressure is equally
Absolutely.
useful.
No, absolutely.
So that's where I think the self-regulation and the SRO, or the SROs play such an important part in making sure, the rising tide lifts all boats.
No, absolutely. I think what I'm hearing is the law can tell you what is a complete no, a prohibition, which is harm based, as you rightly said, right? That what are the guardrails? What type of content is not permissible, whatever the way we have seen. And then whatever is permissible, within for that you have how to is that the correct summary or
So I'll tell you something. We
Yeah.
also have to recognize, let's be very pragmatic about this. A lot of the things that we are trying to so-called regulate are things that have no precedence.
yes.
We've never had to experience overall as a society, as an industry, or even as governments. We didn't have to ever regulate AI. We didn't know that AI was a thing 10 years ago.
Right.
So there's no blueprint to refer back
Available.
to. There is
Correct.
no playbook. So yes, so it's easier to say, okay, we will not use AI for such and such cases, which is absolutely
Exactly.
a black and white. But it's very difficult to say what are the possibilities, the good
other,
case
yes.
scenarios of that.
So, yeah.
And that's where the innovation part lies.
Absolutely.
So especially in a market like India, it is. So I was at the AI Summit
Yes.
3 weeks ago that Prime Minister Modi hosted. You could see the enthusiasm around AI from the top levels of government. You had the biggest AI companies out there. So there is a lot of enthusiasm. Overall, India is a country where technology, people are more pro-technology because we see what technology has done to society at large in India and how it has been a net positive contributor to majority of Indians.
Yeah.
So India is very pro-technology. So obviously there are going to be some anxieties, but in my opinion, the anxieties come from what we don't know.
Right.
So it's the fear of the unknown, not
Yeah.
necessarily fear of the known. So overall, I think that's why governments, industries, brands, and any one of us, there is an appreciation that a lot of these things are new. So we also may need to course correct, and we are open to it.
absolutely.
And being humble about it and being open about it, saying, hey, maybe they got this wrong last time, but let's course correct it, is something that we all need to participate in.
So absolutely. So what sort of to summarize, innovation is here to stay, especially in advertising, because we are on this panel talking about advertising, and all of us can continue these conversations. These conversations are important. If you can predict better, probably you can plan better. You can course correct at the right time. Is that the simplest summary that we can make from this conversation? Of course, apart from all the things you have said, is there a time for a couple of questions or?
More than a question, Dipanjan and I had a very fascinating conversation yesterday on agentic AI and agents. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, Dipanjan. Because that to me is your prediction for the future as well, right? In
Yeah.
terms of just the
Well,
whole
that-
marketing ecosystem. So
That's my prediction for the future, but take it with a pinch of salt.
yeah, we'll take it with lots of pinch of salt.
So I don't want you to
It's
go
too
and say
great to
Google
be-
said this and this is the future. 5 years ago, someone told us that
But
we
you're
live in
just-
the metaverse.
Yeah, but you are just scenario building. Let's put it that way.
So one of the things, if you ask me to predict, so Manisha asked me, what do you think is going to be, and how is advertising going to look like in the next 5 years? So I said, we've all heard about, traditionally, if you think about it, advertising is in two parts, B2C and B2B. I said it's going to be B2A, and that's business to agents. So by that, what I meant was, there will come a time very soon in the future where, as consumers, we will be deploying our own agents. We will be building our own agents for ourselves, who we will delegate most of the stuff for us to do, like the smaller stuff, the day-to-day stuff, okay, buy our groceries, book my flight tickets, and so on. Not maybe so high-value stuff like buying a property or buying a car. But the day-to-day stuff, the utility stuff, will all be delegated to my own agent, which I'm, let's say, building. Now, as a brand, you probably need to figure out how your how you need to market to those agents that the consumers will deploy, because till now you've been marketing to consumers or businesses. And businesses, by the way, will deploy their own agents. And fast forward maybe a few years from then, it'll be probably A to A, agent to agent. Brands will deploy their agents, and consumers will have their agents. So the agent-to-agent communication will become very important. So obviously there are questions around, okay, how do you know that the two agents are not rogue agents, and what's the trust layer between that? But if you ask me in the next 5 years, I think B2A will be a thing, and brands need to start thinking about how to market to agents. And there are ways to go about it. I'm more than happy to talk about it. Thank you, Manisha.
Thank you. Thank you for the for the panel. This discussion was the future gazing crystal ball. So we'll be here after 5 years and watch our video if it is recorded and see where where we went wrong and when we were right. Thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for being so patient.